Ada was a bright, ambitious girl growing up in the small village of Umuola. Despite the poverty that surrounded her, she dreamed of a future far beyond the dusty roads and crumbling huts of her home. She excelled in school, her eyes always fixed on the horizon, where she believed a better life awaited. Her mother, though poor, encouraged her dreams, telling her that education was the key to breaking free from the chains of their circumstances. Life in Umuola was hard. The villagers struggled daily to make ends meet, and opportunities were scarce. Ada's family relied on subsistence farming, and there were days when they went to bed hungry. But Ada refused to let her circumstances define her. She studied by candlelight, determined to earn a scholarship that would take her to the city. Her teachers saw her potential and often praised her for her intelligence and resilience. However, not everyone in the village shared her optimism. Some mocked her dreams, saying a girl from Umuola could never rise above her station. Ada's classmates, jealous of her academic success, often teased her, calling her the village bookworm. But Ada ignored their taunts, focusing instead on her goals. She knew that one day she would prove them all wrong. Ada's determination was fueled by her mother's unwavering support. Despite their poverty, her mother made sure Ada had everything she needed for school, even if it meant sacrificing her own comfort. "You are my hope," her mother would say, stroking her hair. "One day, you will make me proud." These words became Ada's mantra, pushing her to work harder every day. But as Ada grew older, she began to feel the weight of her responsibilities. Her younger siblings looked up to her, and she knew she had to set an example. The pressure to succeed was immense, but Ada refused to give up. She believed that her dreams were not just for herself, but for her entire family. She was determined to lift them out of poverty, no matter the cost. One evening, as Ada walked home from school, she took a different route, passing through the abandoned market square. The place was eerie, with its crumbling stalls and overgrown weeds. Villagers avoided it, claiming it was haunted by spirits. But Ada, lost in thought about her future, didn't notice the shadows creeping in. Little did she know, this decision would change her life forever. The market square was silent, except for the rustling of leaves and the distant chirping of birds. Ada quickened her pace, eager to get home before dark. But as she passed an old stall, she heard a low groan. Startled, she turned and saw a figure huddled in the corner. It was Madman, the village outcast. His clothes were tattered, and his eyes were wild, but there was something in his gaze that made Ada pause. Ikenna was a figure of fear in Umuola. Villagers whispered that he was cursed, that he had been driven mad by evil spirits. Children threw stones at him, and adults crossed the street to avoid him. But Ada had always felt a pang of pity for him. She remembered hearing stories about how he had once been a normal man, but something had broken him. Now, seeing him up close, she felt a strange connection. Against her better judgment, Ada approached Ikenna cautiously. He recoiled at first, muttering incoherently, but she spoke softly, reassuring him. She offered him the small piece of bread she had saved from lunch. To her surprise, he took it, his trembling hands clutching the food like a lifeline. For a moment, his eyes met hers, and Ada saw something she hadn't expected: gratitude. From that day on, Ada began to visit Ikenna secretly. She brought him food and water, and though he rarely spoke, she felt a strange comfort in his presence. His ramblings were often nonsensical, but Ada listened patiently, sensing that he needed someone to hear him. She didn't understand why she felt drawn to him, but she couldn't ignore the loneliness in his eyes. The villagers would have been horrified if they knew about Ada's visits. To them, Ikenna was a dangerous lunatic, a man to be feared and avoided. But Ada saw something else: a broken soul in need of kindness. She began to wonder what had driven him to madness and whether there was a way to help him. Her curiosity grew, and so did her bond with the outcast. One evening, as Ada sat with Ikenna, he suddenly grabbed her arm, his eyes wide with fear. He muttered something about a curse and a lost inheritance, but his words were jumbled and hard to understand. Ada tried to calm him, but he grew more agitated, his grip tightening. Before she could react, He pulled her closer, his breath hot against her ear. That night, Ada's life took a dark turn, and nothing would ever be the same. Ada woke up the next morning with a heavy heart and a sense of dread. She couldn't shake the memory of Ikenna's erratic behavior the night before. Her arm still bore the marks of his grip, and she felt a deep unease. She avoided the market square on her way to school, but the encounter haunted her thoughts. She couldn't tell anyone what had happened, not even her mother. Weeks passed, and Ada tried to push the incident to the back of her mind. She focused on her studies, determined not to let anything derail her dreams. But soon, she began to feel unwell. Her body felt heavy, and she was constantly tired. At first, she thought it was stress, but when her mother noticed her symptoms, she took her to the village healer. The healer's diagnosis was like a punch to the gut. Ada was pregnant. The news spread through the village like wildfire, and soon everyone knew. The whispers began cruel, judgmental words that cut deeper than any knife. "She carries the devil's seed," they said. "She has brought shame to her family." Ada's classmates mocked her, and even hers looked at her with pity and disdain. Ada's mother stood by her side, shielding her from the worst of the backlash. But the weight of the village's judgment was crushing. Ada's dreams of education and a better future seemed to slip further away with each passing day. She felt like a prisoner in her own home, afraid to face the world outside. The once bright girl who had dared to dream was now a shadow of her former self. As her belly grew, the villagers' cruelty intensified. They called her children cursed, saying they would bring misfortune to the village. Ada tried to ignore their words, but the pain was unbearable. She often cried herself to sleep, wondering how her life had come to this. Her only solace was her mother's unwavering love and the tiny lives growing inside her. When Ada gave birth to twins, the resemblance to Ikenna was undeniable. The villagers' worst fears seemed confirmed, and they demanded that Ada and her children leave the village. Ada's heart broke as she realized she had no choice but to go. With her infants strapped to her back, she prepared to leave the only home she had ever known. Her spirit battered but not yet broken. The day Ada gave birth to her twins was both joyous and heartbreaking. The babies were healthy, their tiny cries filling the small hut where Ada lay exhausted. Her mother cradled them, tears streaming down her face. But the joy was short-lived. As soon as the villagers saw the babies, their whispers turned into shouts. "They look just like the Madman," someone cried. "They are cursed," another declared. The elders gathered, their faces stern, and declared that the children were a bad omen for the village. Ada's mother tried to shield her daughter and the newborns from the villagers' cruelty, but it was no use. The news spread quickly, and soon everyone in Umuola knew about the cursed twins. People avoided Ada's family, refusing to trade with them or even speak to them. Ada's once bright future now seemed like a distant memory, replaced by the harsh reality of raising two children alone in a village that despised them. The twins, a boy and a girl, were named Chima and Neka, meaning God knows and Mother is supreme. Ada chose these names as a reminder that, despite the villagers' judgment, her children were a blessing. She poured all her love into them, determined to give them a better life. But the weight of her isolation was heavy. She often cried herself to sleep, wondering how she would survive. The villagers' cruelty knew no bounds. Children threw stones at Ada's hut, and adults spat on the ground when she passed by. Her former classmates mocked her, calling her the madman's wife. Even the village elders, who were supposed to protect their people, turned their backs on her. Ada felt like an outcast in the only place she had ever called home. Despite the hatred, Ada's mother remained her rock. She helped care for the twins, often going without food so Ada and the babies could eat. "You are strong, my daughter," she would say. "This is not the end of your story." Her words gave Ada the strength to keep going, even when the world seemed against her. But deep down, Ada wondered if her mother's faith was misplaced. One day, as Ada carried the twins to the stream to wash their clothes, she overheard a group of women talking. "She should leave the village," one said. "Her children will bring us nothing but bad luck." Ada's heart sank. She knew they were right. She couldn't stay in Umola forever. But where would she go? With no money and no support, the future seemed bleak. Yet, as she looked at her sleeping babies, she felt a flicker of hope. She would find a way to protect them, no matter what. Just when Ada thought her life couldn't get any harder, a glimmer of hope appeared in the form of Obina, a kind-hearted widower from a neighboring village. Obina had heard about Ada's plight and felt a deep sense of compassion for her. He visited her one evening, bringing gifts of food and clothing for the twins. Ada was wary at first, but Obina's gentle demeanor put her at ease. Over time, Obina became a regular visitor. He helped Ada with chores, played with the twins, and even stood up to the villagers who tried to harass her. Ada began to see him as a friend, someone who truly cared for her and her children. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Obina took her hand and said, "Ada, you deserve happiness. Let me take care of you and the twins." Ada was stunned. No one had ever shown her such kindness, and the thought of a fresh start was tempting. But she was also afraid. What if Obina's kindness was just a facade? What if he too would betray her? Her mother encouraged her to accept his proposal, saying, "You cannot live in fear forever. Take this chance, my daughter." After much thought, Ada agreed, and the village buzzed with the news of their upcoming wedding. The wedding day was simple but beautiful. Ada wore a borrowed dress, and the twins were dressed in new clothes gifted by Obina. For the first time in years, Ada felt a sense of hope. The villagers, though still wary, seemed to soften their stance. Perhaps, Ada thought, this was the beginning of a new chapter in her life. But fate had other plans. That night, as Ada and Obina celebrated their union, tragedy struck. Obina collapsed suddenly, clutching his chest. Ada screamed for help, but by the time the villagers arrived, it was too late. Obina was gone. The villagers were horrified, and their fear quickly turned to anger. "She is cursed," they cried. "She has brought death to our village." Ada's heart shattered as she realized that, once again, her life was falling apart. The villagers demanded that Ada leave Umuola immediately. "Take your cursed children and go," they shouted. Ada's mother tried to defend her, but even she couldn't stop the tide of hatred. With tears streaming down her face, Ada packed her few belongings and strapped the twins to her back. As she walked away from the only home she had ever known, she whispered to her children, "We will find a place where no one will judge us, and we will rise again." Ada walked for hours, her feet aching and her heart heavy. The twins, oblivious to their mother's pain, slept peacefully against her back. The road ahead was uncertain, but Ada refused to give up. She had survived betrayal, shame, and loss, and she was determined to keep going. "We will find a new home," she whispered to her children, "a place where we can be free." Along the way, Ada encountered other travelers who offered her food and shelter. Some pitied her, while others admired her strength. She told no one her story, fearing their judgment, but she carried her mother's words in her heart. "You are strong, my daughter. This is not the end of your story." These words became her mantra, pushing her forward even when the road seemed endless. Days turned into weeks, and Ada's resilience began to pay off. She found work in a small town, washing clothes and cleaning homes to support her children. The townspeople were kinder than the villagers of Umuola, and Ada began to feel a sense of belonging. She enrolled the twins in a local school, determined to give them the education she had always dreamed of. But even as she built a new life, Ada couldn't forget the past. She often thought about Ikenna and the night that had changed everything. She wondered what had become of him, and whether he was still wandering the streets of Umuola, lost in his madness. Little did she know, Ikenna's story was far from over. One evening, as Ada sat by the fire with her children, she heard a knock at the door. She opened it to find a well-dressed man standing before her. His eyes were familiar, but it took her a moment to recognize him. It was Ikena, but he was no longer the madman she had known. His eyes were clear, his demeanor calm. "Ada," he said softly, "I've been searching for you." Ada's heart raced as Ikena explained everything. He told her about his father's fortune, the curse that had driven him to madness, and how the birth of their son had broken it. "You saved me, Ada," he said. "And now, I want to give you and our children the life you deserve." Ada was overwhelmed with emotion. The man she had once pitied was now offering her a chance at redemption. As she looked at her children, she realized that their journey was just beginning. Ada stood frozen in the doorway, her mind racing as she tried to process Ikena's words. The man before her was unrecognizable from the broken soul she had known in Umuola. His clothes were clean and expensive, his posture confident, and his eyes, wild and unfocused, now radiated clarity and warmth. "Ikena?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. "Yes, Ada, it's me, and I owe you everything." Ikena stepped inside, his gaze falling on the twins, who were peeking curiously from behind their mother. His eyes filled with tears as he knelt before them. "These are my children," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. Ada's heart swelled with a mix of relief and disbelief. She had spent years believing Ikena was lost to madness, and now here he was, a changed man, claiming his place as a father. Over the next few hours, Ikena shared his story. He explained how he was the son of a wealthy billionaire, a man who had built an empire but left behind enemies. After his father's death, Ikena's colleagues, driven by envy and greed, had conspired to curse him. "They wanted my inheritance," he said bitterly. "The curse drove me to madness, and I became a shadow of myself. But there was a way to break it if I fathered a son." Ada listened in stunned silence as Ikena recounted how her kindness had saved him. "You were the only one who saw me as a human being," he said, his voice breaking. "When our son was born, the curse was broken. My mind cleared, and I remembered who I was. But by then, you were gone. I've spent years searching for you, Ada. I couldn't rest until I found you and our children." Ada's emotions were a whirlwind: relief, anger, joy, and sorrow, all tangled together. She thought of the years she had spent in shame and isolation, the pain of being cast out by her village, and the struggles of raising the twins alone. But as she looked at Ikena, she saw the same pain reflected in his eyes. He suffered too, and now he was here, offering her a chance at a new beginning. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Ikena said, his voice filled with regret. "But I want to make things right. You and the children deserve a life of happiness, and I want to give that to you." Ada took a deep breath, her heart pounding. She had spent so long surviving. Now, she was being offered a chance to thrive. But could she trust him? Could she let go of the past and embrace this new future? Ada's decision didn't come easily. She spent days weighing her options, torn between her fear of being hurt again and her desire for a better life for her children. But as she watched Ikena interact with the twins, playing with them, teaching them, and showering them with love, she began to see the man he truly was. He was no longer the madman of Umuola. He was a father, a protector, and a man determined to right his wrongs. One evening, as the sun set over their small home, Ada made her choice. "Ikena," she said, her voice steady, "I want to give us a chance. Not just for me, but for our children. They deserve to know their father, and I deserve to live without fear." Ikena's eyes filled with tears as he took her hand. "Thank you, Ada," he whispered. "I won't let you down." Together, they returned to Umuola, not as outcasts, but as a family reclaiming their place in the world. The villagers were stunned when they saw Ikena, now a wealthy and respected man, walking beside Ada and the twins. Whispers spread like wildfire, but this time they were filled with awe and regret. "The madman was a billionaire's son?" they murmured. "And Ada's children broke the curse?" Ikena wasted no time in making amends. He built a new school in Umuola, ensuring that every child, regardless of their background, had access to education. He also provided jobs for the villagers, lifting many out of poverty. Ada watched with pride as her husband worked tirelessly to rebuild the community that had once shunned them. She knew their journey wasn't just about redemption, it was about creating a legacy for their children. As for Ada, she finally had the life she had always dreamed of. She pursued her education, earning a degree in business, and worked alongside Ikenna to manage his empire. The twins, Chima and Neka, grew up surrounded by love and opportunity, their futures bright and full of promise. Ada often looked at them and marveled at how far they had come. They were living proof that even in the darkest times, hope could lead to triumph. One evening, as the family sat together under the stars, Ada turned to Ikenna and smiled. "We've come a long way," she said. He nodded, his eyes filled with gratitude. "And it's all because of you, Ada. Your kindness, your strength, your resilience, you saved us all." Ada leaned into his embrace, her heart full. The outcast's journey had been long and painful, but it had led her to a place of love, redemption, and endless possibility.